I'm PG, I'm chillin', and this is my review of Mac Miller's second posthumous album, Balloonerism. If you've been following along with my channel, which means you're a subscriber, and that's awesome, and if you're not, please subscribe, then you'll know that during the course of last year, during the end of last year, I've been doing 30-second album reviews, but I feel like in this case, I want to dive a bit more and do what I did in the past and do something more long form. For one, I haven't really talked about Mac Miller on my channel at all, and of course, as a millennial, I did grow up, or at least seeing the growth of Mac Miller, when he was kind of like a kid up until his death. So I want to speak a bit about my experience or my fandom of Mac Miller. I'm not going to say I'm a huge fan of Mac Miller, but let me just say this. When Mac Miller was really taking off in high school, 2009, even 2010, I wasn't really sold on him. I thought of him more as a, kind of this like backpack / frat rapper. I mean, like one of the cool kids kind of thing. And, I'm in high school, I'm a fucking loner, grungy type of person. That's the phase I was going through at the time. So I was more occupied with a Kid Cudi or even a Wiz Khalifa. But of course, all those guys are all tied together in some sort of way. On June 18, 2013, some point in college, it was a release date of 3 albums. It was Kanye's Yeezus, it was J. Cole's sophomore album, Born Sinner, and then there was Mac Miller's Watching Movies with the Sound Off. And I'm a big Kanye fan, so that's the first listen I gave was Yeezus, and at that time, even for a Kanye fan, that was a bit of an odd and jarring album to listen to. And then there was J. Cole's Born Sinner. I liked J. Cole at the time. I still love him now. And that was a good sophomore album. And then I was listening with a college friend to Mac Miller's Watching Movies with the Sound Off. And I remember thinking to myself, I think I enjoy this album more than Born Sinner and Yeezus, at least at the time. So that's when I started going back to Mac Miller's discography at the time. So that would be, something like Macadelic, Blue Slide Park. I would say at that point on, I became a Mac Miller fan. Now back to the album review itself. If you didn't know by now, mostly the recordings and the audio from this album are from 2014, which is around the time Mac Miller was putting out the project Faces. And that was the time period, or that was the project where Mac Miller really started pivoting from hip-hop, rap, into something more alternative, something more neo-soul, almost lo-fi, which we did receive on projects later on like Swimming, and of course his first posthumous record, Circles. And from that point on in his career, 2014, 2015, 2016, really up until his death, you could tell by the material, how he was sounding, how the production was sounding, that Mac Miller was really dealing with a lot of drug addiction, which he openly talked about and openly rapped about, of course. And he was taking a deeper dive lyrically with subjects like depression, drug addiction, obviously love and relationships, which he did a lot of on the Divine Feminine. So in terms of Mac Miller's death and his posthumous work, if Circles was considered this euphoric kind of sense of closure, a bit of bliss, obviously it was somber at times, I hate to say it, but like ascension and his passing, that's what Circles felt like. It felt like this moment of, again, I'm saying the word closure, but it felt a little bit euphoric as well. This album here, this posthumous record here, Balloonerism, it's more of a downer, let's say, more of a dissension than ascension. And when I say dissension, I mean, of course, being down, or really the come down of a high, or in this case, drug addiction, and which makes sense considering the time frame of these recordings. So aside from the first release song off this album, $5 Pony Rides, which is clearly, now listening to it, the most upbeat and colorful song on this project, outside of that, this album is pretty much sonically sad, somber, and eerie. And you can hear that obviously in Mac Miller's voice, his writing, the material, the tone of the album. But that's not to say that the production of this album is all, sad, lonely, downer, or in this case, Mrs. Deborah Downer. The production can still sound very lush and lively. That's given with a lot of live instrumentation. And that's not just given in song titles like Tambourine Dream, DJ's chord organ, and Rick's piano. Those instruments or elements are actually instrumental across the whole album. And it really makes it sound abstract, which was the vibe that Mac Miller was going for towards the end of his career and on the album Circles. And I'm putting emphasis on the live instrumentation because it really emphasizes the authenticity and the rawness in Mac Miller's voice, or even on the song DJ's chord organ, a young SZA's heavenly vocals as well. And you can really feel it in Mac Miller's voice, because while the bars aren't really like this cleverly crafted thing, kind of like an Eminem or what Mac Miller would do early on in his career, the lyrics are very, very poignant, they're very deep, especially given the time Mac Miller was recording this and what he was dealing with at the time. I went to sleep famous, I woke up invisible, rich as fuck and miserable. Somebody died today, I saw his pictures in the funny papers. Didn't think anybody died on a Friday. You wonder when God will just listen and give you a break, and he says, "See, living and dying are one and the same. If I die young, promise to smile at my funeral." Of course, highlighting drug addiction on songs like Stoned and Mrs. Deborah Downer, honing in on the concept of death on songs like Mannequins, Rick's Piano, and Funny Papers, and also giving us his introspection on life, like on a song, Do You Have a Destination, or really across many other songs on this album. So of course, that subject matter does match this almost jazzy / psychedelic, woozy production and tone throughout the album. And in terms of sounding abstract, probably the most abstract sounding song on here is the closing track, which is 11 minutes long, and after maybe about 4 or 5 minutes of Mac Miller performing, kind of ominous with all the vocals kind of harmonizing and reverbing and echoing in the background as the beat gets more darker and haunting, and then hearing the repeated voicemail messaging of, it's like someone trying to call you and just keeps missing the call as if that person isn't there anymore or isn't answering your call. And it just, I don't know, it just sounds very, like I said, sounds ominous and haunting. Sorry, it's been a while since I did one of these longer form reviews, but I also forgot to mention Delusional Thomas, his pitched down or even pitched up alter ego of his, that drug-induced alter ego of his. Delusional Thomas is also featured on this thing, sprinkled across a little bit of the track list as well. Mainly Delusional Thomas, that feature him, takes over on the song Transformation, which honestly is my least favorite song on this thing. And while it's not my favorite song, I do like the message that Mac Miller is saying on Excelsior, where he's making this connection between childhood innocence and then going to adulthood and having that all stripped away. So yeah, like I said, this album is a lot more somber, sad, hell, even heavier than Circles. But just like that posthumous record, this does give you a feeling of euphoria and a bit of closure into Mac Miller's passing, or at least closure in what he was going through. Really makes you want to listen and feel for him, and he really projects that on this album. And I also have to add that whoever is in charge of Mac Miller's estate, his music, his recordings, they're 2 for 2 basically. They've really hit home on what Mac Miller or what an artist would want. The album does sound cohesive. It's put together tastefully. Yeah, big 2 for 2 on Mac Miller posthumous records. And you hear a lot of posthumous records. I don't know if it's because of the estate or just how recordings and these files are worked on or done. But a lot of posthumous records you hear, they're just kind of these jumbled or like scrambled up records, and maybe that's all that they can do, or maybe that's all that they have, but they all just sound like these thrown together playlists, whereas between Balloonerism and Circles, it actually sounds like a tastefully cohesive and an album that I feel like the artist would be proud of. So if you're new to Mac Miller's music, this album may not resonate with you, and not that I'm a big Mac Miller fan, like I said before, but listening to Mac Miller, I can understand this album, what he was going for, and at least what it means, particularly given the time period of when he was recording these songs. And at one point I did tear up listening to this album, so it does hit me in the feels. And given that music is a feeling, if you've been following along my channel, I'm decided now for my scoring system, I'm not going to do decimals like a 7.1 or 0.3, 0.8, whatever. I'm just going to do half points, so 5.5, 6.5, so on and so forth. So this is what I'm feeling, and all scores aside and all that stuff, being an album reviewer, I really did, it really makes me appreciate Mac Miller and his growth as an artist even more listening to this, and now making me want to go back and listen to Circles, Swimming, even Faces, which I actually believe Faces is my favorite or his best album, because we really do see some of his best writing, rapping, as well as the beginning of this ascension into artistry that we get later in his career. My favorite songs are Do You Have a Destination, Friendly Hallucinations, $5 Pony Rides, Mrs. Deborah Downer, and Funny Papers. But what are your thoughts on this album? What are your favorite songs? Did you like this album? Did you like this review? Let me know in the comment section, feedback below. Of course, if you like the video, like the video. If you like it so much, subscribe to the channel. These are my thoughts. Mac Miller, rest in peace. Stay blessed.